Hey Jordan, how are you, my friend?
Hey man, I'm very good, thank you. How are you?
I'm very, very good. I'm very excited to have you on the podcast, man. This is fairly surreal to me. I've been watching the Sidemen and the before that KSI for years, like years and years. And what they've become now is some colossal brand between themselves as the Sidemen, and they're launching all these different side projects and stuff like that. And now talking to you as sort of behind the scenes, the background, like what's going on behind the scenes. It's a very surreal opportunity to be able to see what actually happens and what the thought process that happens behind the scenes when it comes to a brand like the Sidemen. So yeah, welcome to the podcast. This is a very unique episode, I
Oh,
think.
thank you. Thank you so much. And yeah, really excited to get into it all, really.
How did you get started in this? It's a very unique role that you've undertaken.
Yeah, I mean, so how did I get started? Um, so I think it goes back a bit, really. I mean, just to preface as well, I think myself, and I'll get into this, but Tuco fans, we've come at kind of not the end point of their journey, but it's really the end of the chapter that they've had so far. I think we're very fortunate enough to be in a position where I think when we joined them, they were on maybe like 9 mil, 10 mil, something like that. They're now up to 15, 16. But they've been doing this for now. This is their ninth year, 10 year next, 10th anniversary next year, which is obviously really exciting. But yeah, we're fortunate enough to come on the end, come on kind of the end, not the end. They're going to go for a lot longer, but sort of the end of one chapter, the start of the next. And I think that's
Mm.
what's brilliant in terms of how I got to know the guys, and we did as Arcade. We've got three co-founders: myself, Sam, and Aaron. Myself and Aaron worked at YMU, which is a management company formerly known as James Grant. So they look after most of the big people in TV, very ITV led roster, as well as some new sort of and exciting up and coming people like Munya Chihuahua, Amelia de Moldenberg, Francis Bourgeois from TikTok, and a bunch of other people as
Hmm.
well, American.
Yeah, I went to an event recently with them, and those two people were at the same panel together because yeah,
Yeah,
the same agency. Yeah.
exactly. So I was their chief creative officer for 4 years, and I sort of helped with a lot of that sort of future proof and bringing a lot of the new talent in. And Aaron was over on the business management side, so the sort of accountancy side. We always got on really well. We were good friends, and he was always like an accountant plus manager, accountant plus I'd say. It's like an accountant, but he'd do all of the sort of business strategy and support that almost a manager would and should do. He did that for a lot of his clients, so we got on well, and he'd bring me in to talk to his clients about how they could improve on social and build out strategies and enhance everything that they were doing. So we stayed close. He then went off to go and manage some TikTokers that he had done business management for. This is when TikTok was just kind of booming and
Hmm.
starting pre-lockdown. So he went off, and we always stayed close and sort of helped him from afar. Then he ended up meeting Sam. So Sam is our third co-founder, Sam Ewens, who is basically I would say he is the creator accountant in the UK. He is number one in terms of his roster. He's been doing this for about 10 years, thereabouts. He is unbelievably connected. He is like leader in the space, and he sort of pioneered, I think, the YouTube accountancy side. Like his business, Starbucks, looks after obviously the Sidemen and people like the F2, Jeremy Lynch, Patricia Bright, a huge roster. And so he has been working with the boys for a number of years individually and then also as a group. And so he met Aaron and they ended up speaking. And then we thought, okay, let's all get together. Aaron thought, like, pull me into the conversation too. We all got together as the three. And then we realized very quickly that actually for the Sidemen as a group, there was so much creative potential of so many ideas that we came together and thought, hold on, they could do so much here. And it could be amazing fun for everyone involved. And a lot of what I was doing at YME was strategy, brand building, that sort of forward thinking, I guess, future proofing for clients. That was always the thing. So it was, how do we apply that? And when Sam was able to have a conversation with them and say, look, guys, like, we're coming together we can come together to form this unit around you and to support you in this next phase. We got on the call with them, ran through a strategy. They voted on the ideas that they wanted to do, and then they said, yep, let's do it. So we started off, and that was March, April last year, 2021. And then, yeah, we jumped in. And since then, it's been amazing fun. We've launched three sort of key brands with them, be it XIX Vodka, which is a vodka brand, Sides, which is a fried chicken restaurant chain, which is now up to 50 to 60, I lose track, 50 to 60 sites in the UK, Ghost Kitchen base, and then the one Wembley Box Park. We've got UAE, USA launching, India, and a bunch of other places launching as well. So that's Sides, and then Side Plus, which is the membership club, which is a huge community now, amazing group working on it, and then also incredible community actually as a part of it, which is like the premium membership club for the boys, giving that
Hmm.
extra level of depth into them. We have a podcast on there, we have two other formats, we have giveaways, we have in-person meetups. cinema nights. We have all sorts. So those are the three, and then we've also got a number of other projects that I cannot speak about that are in the pipeline. I wish I could, as well as a number of partnerships and all sorts, which we're building. We're building towards, and the aim really being, how do we expand this Sidemen brand into, and I say this to people all the time. I genuinely believe that the boys are like the number one British export of this generation from an entertainment perspective. Nothing, I think, really comes close in terms of the
Yeah.
numbers, the ability to connect with people, the scale of what they're
No,
doing.
I
It's
fully agree with you. Yeah, I fully
Yeah,
agree
I
with
think
you.
One Direction was probably, I always say One Direction is probably the last generation, and I say Sidemen are what 1D were for
Yeah.
the 2010s for this generation. So I think it's basically giving them their flowers, I say, and helping to establish through all the business side and the back end a structure which helps them maintain that position and then strengthen it for the next generation as well.
Yeah, it's amazing to see as well for someone that's been watching YouTube for a long time, like years. It's been amazing to see the sort of transition from YouTubers who weren't really taken seriously at the beginning to then brands working with them directly to now them launching their own brands. It's a very, very cool transition. And I guess, where do you see the next step of YouTube and content creation?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, it has to be in this owned space where actually brands, although it can be brilliant when the partnerships are great and right and they work well in so many ways. I think the reliance on brand deals becomes a ceiling that very quickly you hit when you're growing and you're successful. And I think for a lot of creators, of course, you have to pay the bills through brands. But when you don't, you realize, I think, why are we taking this money from a brand when in reality we could create our own brand that could make 10, 20 times as much as this
Yeah.
brand deal. And actually, I think that power which the creators have, creators, I think now more than ever are so cross-platform. There's no longer a one platform dependence where there maybe used to be. I think when things like TikTok start properly
Mm.
opening up monetization, we're going to see, hopefully, we all hope, we said this with Instagram and didn't really happen, right? But we hope a real spike in I guess, yeah, diversification for creators. YouTube is again is the home, but at the same time, there's opportunities now. Once you have an audience of scale, you can build and
Yeah, yeah,
expand
yeah.
the universe around that. So, I think, yeah, the future is in diversification. It has to be away from individual platforms and into owning your own revenue stream, so you're not ultimately reliant on algorithms in order to pay your bills. Because that's the trap, which I think becomes very difficult for people to reconcile with. Whether that's algorithms in relation to the amount you can generate from views for brands to pay you, or algorithms in terms of the AdSense revenue that you're driving on platform. From with YouTube as an example there.
Yeah, because content, I mean, even for me doing this podcast and doing multiple other podcasts, it's not essentially like a scalable thing. What's scalable, I guess, if you build that audience, is to build these different businesses that can do their own thing. And I think that's the really interesting transition, is it's now building these different revenue streams or these different brands that are inherently incredibly scalable. So yeah, I loved your answer to that. But I think what's very interesting is that, so you talk about sort of the Sidemen doing it, and of course they have this huge audience, like absolutely colossal. At what stage, I guess, for creators listening right now, like they might be fairly small, when's the right stage to actually be able to, because you talk about future proofing their content, at what stage do they think about doing that?
Yeah, well, I think I mean, it depends on the type of creator. Obviously, the type of content, the relationship they have with their audience is probably the number one. Like, what is actually the relationship and the dynamic they have with their audience? I think for so many creators, they might entertain their audience, but the audience doesn't really know them. How would that then convert? I think that's a problem we have with TikTok, right? Where a lot of creators on that platform, they might have huge numbers because of the personality, because of the videos they're doing. But is there that real personal connection? Can you develop that depth with a 60
Yeah.
second TikTok? Maybe some, of course, when they're talking more and they're more themselves. But when it's slightly more abstract or more technical, is there that depth? Will there be a real conversion because people really love you, or do they love the content you're
Mm.
making? There's a bit of a difference. So I think, yeah, I think the right time is around when you establish that connection properly with your audience in a way that isn't just for the content, but is around the value either you bring as a person to their lives from an entertainment perspective, or the value that you bring in terms of insight, expertise, whatever it is that is your niche. Once you have that connection, it's clearly there. It's about trying to stress test that to see if that will truly convert into something more meaningful. And I think as long as the mindset, which is always the thing for us, is, are we adding over and above the amount of value for audiences in relation to the amount we're charging for things or the amount we expect of things? That's always the key. It's like, are we driving so much that we are giving and giving and giving? And of course, there are costs to these things. These things that aren't for free, and they don't cost. They cost money to put on and make. But when a business is delivering real value for an audience, I think that's when it sort of shifts and it becomes about. And I think this is the thing for us, offering up more opportunities for access for our audience in different ways, rather than
Mm.
just as I think for some creators it could be, is around just how do we make money and drive commercial success. I think it has to be
Yeah.
around value for the community and adding more touch points and more access points first. And then obviously there's a commercial result if it's good enough, but it has to still be good enough. And that's when the hard work, I think, that's where it really goes into.
That's an amazing answer, Jordan. Yeah, thank you so much for that. I think what's a very interesting point that you made was like, I guess, deciphering, making the difference between the revenue stream as well as the value that you're bringing to your audience. And I think that is something that's definitely, I mean, it can be overlooked because the money aspect might overpower the value that you're giving to your audience. I think that's incredibly important for you guys managing the Sidemen because their audience is very impressionable, but also like they're very big, but also very impressionable. So I guess behind the scenes, how do you make the decisions as to where you want to go next? Because it's a very, very difficult one to do. Like, how did you decide to go down the vodka route? How did you decide to go down the fried chicken route? There's so many different options that they would that they could take, and given their audience, they will get some level of result. But it's like, how do you make those decisions?
Yeah, well, I think the key, and interestingly, it goes back to that first conversation we had with the guys, was around here's a list as long as your arm of things that would work, right, and
Yeah.
could work. But ultimately, it's what have you always wanted to do? Like, what really moves you and and makes you go, you know what, this is why I'm so happy to be doing what I'm doing right now. This is where I want to be doing in the future. Like, what moves you and drives you guys? Because ultimately, if they're gonna build something and they're going to be behind it creatively, strategically, and they're going to, we're there to operationally drive the business, but they're
Yeah.
the ones who are creatively in these things and living and breathing them, and ultimately the ambassadors of these things out there. They have to love it. So I think it's about working out from day one, what do you love? And this just goes for any creator. What do you love and what do you really want to do and give, let's say, and provide for your audience? And then how do you bottle that into a product that you would really own and buy yourself? And I think even from my experience, going back to when I was at, let's say, a lab Bible or a publisher, the biggest litmus test is, would you like this post? Would you engage with this piece of content? Do you think it bangs? If you don't think it bangs, why would anyone else think it bangs? And
Yeah.
it's the exact same thing for IP. It goes for content, it goes for anything. Would you engage with it? And so for both vodka and fried chicken, which are the two, it's because the boys love both. Like, they love going out and partying, but they also love food, and food's a big part of their life. And as anyone
Mm.
who's been following them, they know that chicken is like really some of the bonds them and gets them going.
Yeah.
Nando's is
Yeah.
of the kind of culture and so on and so forth. So fried chicken made a lot of sense. Strategically, it also works well because it's the number one selling product around the world. So that was secondary really to, do they love it? And they love it. So that
Yeah.
was the thing for both. And actually, if we looked at that table now of what they wanted to do, those two were the number one and number two, respectively.
That's very interesting that you gave that answer because I thought you were going to be doing it from the flip point of view. It's like, how can we leverage the audience? Because you can break down the audience into demographics, into customer personas and stuff like that, which is kind of traditionally in business what you're meant to be doing. But instead, you did it the other way, where it's like, you as creators, what do you actually love to do, and let's explore that route. It's
Yeah,
very
exactly.
interesting you took that approach.
Yeah, well, I think also it's how you drive it. Everyone talks about being authentic and creating products with the, whenever you're, I guess if you were to work with an agency on how to scale your brands as a creator, they might go for, okay, well, what is your audience into? And then how do you,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
create something that they can enjoy? But ultimately, I think it has to be, okay, what do you as a creator, who ultimately these people following or as part of your community, they have an affinity with you and they have an affinity with things that you love, and you are a cultural tastemaker in whatever way that might be, whether you're a fashion influencer or whatever. It has to be something ultimately, first and foremost, then that you will love, and then from there, it's something that you will love that you want to share and provide to your audience. And of
Mm,
course, with an audience of scale, you're not going to get everybody to love your product, but neither should they, right? That's why I think for us, it's about access points. And I always come back to this whenever I talk about the boys and what we're trying to achieve. It's about touch points and access points to different parts of their audience, principally through things that they love first and foremost, not so much around, well, how do we, look at the data and try and find a demographic? Because that, I
yeah.
think, becomes very cold and sterile. I think ultimately we want something with soul and with life, and ultimately to feel like it's as it should, that it's as it, as it genuinely is, that they are behind this spiritually, creatively, and they're the ones who want this to go out into the world because they're proud of the product. And that's the same for
Mm,
XX, for Sides, for Side Plus, for everything that we're doing. The boys love it and they are behind
yeah.
it. And because they love it and they're behind it, hopefully then, and I think we've seen it so far, it drives results and it works well.
I think that definitely shows as like a viewer myself. It's like whenever, not even when they launch their own brands, but when they're working with other brands that they necessarily don't believe in and they're like promoting them. I'm not talking about the site, I'm just talking about YouTube in general. You can definitely see that. Like you can definitely, and it comes across very inauthentic and it comes across very sort of corporatey, I guess. And it's like, you lose interest in that creator, even though they're like, because I mean, the money must have been pretty good for them to do that. So I completely understand why you're coming in with that approach of like, whatever's sort of important to them as a creator, let's go down that route and try to make it work for their audience, like the other way around. Yeah, very
Yeah.
interesting approach.
Yeah, man. I think it's also, it's how you get longevity is ultimately, because if you're a creator and let's say you're thinking about how can I launch a brand for the sake of launching a brand,
Mm,
it's not the case here for us. It was like we want to launch these things because we love these things. We want to get them out. Then we have a vision for them. Cool. Well, let's go and execute on those. But these ideas are way pre-exist us. We're
yeah,
picking up
yeah.
and going, hang on, guys. What have you always wanted to do that you go, it'd be amazing if the Sidemen could have their own restaurant or they could have their
Yeah.
own drink when they go to the club, which was always an image. Like I would love to go to a club and have a magnum of my own drink. Like that was
Mm,
always the thing. So that's then our like, okay, that's the spark, which then gets everyone excited and moving, rather
mm.
than right, how do we try and, as we said, try and fit this product idea into a specific part of the audience and make it again quite sterile and I think quite cold ultimately.
Behind the scenes, Jordan, like how do those conversations work? So would it be like, so I guess how involved are the Simon when it comes to these sort of discussions? Is it like, yeah, I would love to do this, and then you guys behind the scenes would run everything? Like how does it work behind the scenes?
Yeah, I mean, they're as involved as they can be, and they're very involved up front and in the creating of the ideas, and then on the ongoing business side, the aim ultimately is that all of us can find a structure which is sustainable and can run itself, and then they ultimately become creative directors of the brand, and they help to drive ideas and integrations and make sure that it's flowing and moving, and they keep it all in check. But the business side, the operational side, the whole, we're very blessed, I think, to have an amazing partner with on both sides in XX, which is Hero Brands. So Hero Brands, they are the brand behind, or the business behind Joe Madonna Kebab, which is the fastest growing fast food chain in the UK, as well as Island Pokey, Chopaluna, and others. And they're across XIX and sides across two different parts of their businesses. So they are the driving force behind all the operations, all of the kind of the
Mm,
business nuts and bolts. And then our role, and I say our being the Sidemen, us as the management team, and then I guess all the now the staff and the people who work in it from a marketing creative perspective is to drive the day-to-day creative output, social marketing, etc., to make sure that it
mm,
works. We have two businesses operating for both of those as separate entities
yeah.
now. They have to. So yeah, I think in terms of how involved the boys are, I think they have so many brilliant ideas. They creatively drive and are there to bring that heat and that sauce, which is what they do ultimately. And yeah, and then thankfully we've got an amazing team behind the scenes who can
Mm.
then execute on a lot of those ideas.
That's brilliant. Jordan, so I've got loads of friends who have built some incredibly big businesses. Like even us ourselves, like as we're scaling, there are some difficulties that come with scaling businesses, and then you get to a point where the ultimate goal is to scale, and there are challenges that sort of come up. So what's very interesting for me is that given you guys are like managing the Sidemen, that it's a huge business and brand now, but it comes with a lot of unique challenges that other businesses don't have to deal with, because the business is very dependent on like a group of people, which in say like Coca-Cola, that's not really a thing, like it's a very unique thing to the businesses of today, I guess. So some behind the scenes, like what's it like what are the difficulties in managing this brand?
Well, I think the difficulties. I think there should be more difficulties than they are, but thankfully, I think the boys are so good at coming to a consensus. And myself, Sam, and Aaron, and all the team, I think we've always found that they're exceptional at making decisions, and it's the thing I think that separates them from I think what most people maybe would expect from a group of seven guys under the age of 30. Like their
Yeah.
ability to make decisions and to have a process is incredibly effective, and it allows us to launch three brands within the space of, I think last year was three brands in like the space of a month or a month and a half with
Yeah.
Side Plus, Sides and XX, or Side Plus, XX, and Sides. So I think their ability to vote on things, for example, where they always have a full majority vote. It works incredibly well in order to be quick at decision making, and then yeah, I think they know what they like, they know what they don't like, and they can be creatively so focused because they are the experts of what they do, that it means that yeah, we're very privileged because as a creative myself, it allows me, for example, to have a clear guide of okay, well, what will work for
Mm,
this, and how can I then develop and work with the relevant teams behind the scenes to execute on some of those
yeah.
ideas and those visions that they have.
What's been the biggest challenge you would say?
Biggest challenge I think is just the pace of it all. There's so much. I think that's the thing
Yeah.
that we collectively needed to work out and need to still
It's
work out for.
unprecedented as well. That's the unique thing. It's like you can't look at something else and be like, oh yeah, like we can compare it to this. It's like it's
Right.
so new and so unique. As you said, like you could describe, like I've heard the Simon being described as like the Beatles of today. Like that's the comparison we're talking.
No, I think, I believe that wholeheartedly, that there will not be another Sidemen like this. There will not be
Yeah,
another. And I think the way that they have transcended a generation now, and they've been doing it for 10 years, that is of a level which you don't get unless you are
yeah,
truly at that top level. And I think it's funny because the traditional space hasn't really caught up with that, right? And I think
yeah.
that's the interesting bit where there will be a moment. I know there will be where everyone's like, "Oh, hang on a minute." Like these guys are really, really, and not that they're doing it for validation at all, and they don't need it. But it'll be interesting to see because the numbers and the hype and the real love for this brand, I've never seen anything like it before.
Mm.
Um, in terms of what you said was the biggest challenge
Yeah,
right now,
biggest challenge. Yeah,
yeah. So I think it's about just the amount we're doing. There's no blueprint exactly as you said. There's nothing that says. I mean, there's people over like in the States with a huge amount of admiration and respect for Mr. Beast team, for example, Reed and the people
yeah.
at Night Media
I
who
think
are
that's
like
probably the closest thing. Yeah, I would say.
closest, obviously for the US market, but we get obviously a lot of learnings from them about how to do and to move at pace and to build at scale in this space. But yeah, there's no blueprint, especially in the UK, and the culture is very different and so on. So I think it's about how do we, the challenge is how do we do all of these things we want to do without burning everyone out, including them, and making sure that everything is working and flowing with enough space around it so that
Mm.
everyone can still enjoy life and not be absolutely consumed by these things. And the biggest thing I found in order to work through that challenge is to work with amazing teams and to outsource and to bring JV partners and various different partners across the board to
Yeah,
help and build, because it's probably the biggest learning I've actually found is if we want to scale and to move at pace and scale, we work with the best partners to deliver and to execute all the operational side and all of the legwork, which is the bit that takes up the time. And that's been an absolute game changer for me personally, but then also I think seeing it now in action, having those teams around these things, I mean, it makes such a difference. It wouldn't
Mm.
be possible without that.
What about you, Jordan? Like individually, like we've talked a lot about the Sidemen, and like I really want to like close the podcast with sort of asking you as an individual, like what drives you? Because you're incredibly young. You're in a position now where you're driving a brand that's like the likes of which has never been seen before. Like, what drives you as an individual?
You know what? I think what drives me, I love doing things that make people sit up and go, okay, that's really different. It makes me sit up and go, okay, cool.
Yeah,
I was not expecting that. So, for
yeah,
example,
yeah,
we just launched a big partnership with Revolut, right? And again, brand deals and brand partnerships are not one. It's not top on our agenda at all. That's why we're building all our own things. But when the opportunity to work with Revolut came up, it was okay. This is different. You've got the biggest. Your biggest financial super app. It's the terminology. The biggest financial super app in the world. 20 million plus customers, 33 billion valuation, absolutely huge. And they do things very differently and they move in a completely unique way to any of the other challengers in the space, in the sort of fintech space. And they've come, obviously, we're having this conversation about how working with the boys on a big ambassadorship for, a long
yeah.
time, making a real statement with this car product that is, completely unique. No one's ever done it before in the UK. And again, it's like, okay, that sort of stuff gets me going. Okay, that's really cool because then it makes you wake up and think, okay, that's different. I wasn't expecting to see
Mm,
something so big work with what a lot of people in the traditional space, especially, would say are some creators online. Everyone else knows that they are the biggest group in the UK by some margin, but a lot of people still don't know that. So it's having those partnerships that really make you wake up. And then I also think it's being able to write the script a little bit for the space and to
mm.
be able to do things which hopefully are very different and make people go, okay, cool. Again, like with, I guess, with Side Plus or with XX and Sides, it's making things that no one's really been able to piece together before in this way in the UK is really cool. Just because creatively for me, it's such a challenge. Like, can we actually pull
Yeah,
this? We have these big ideas. Can we pull this stuff off? And I always say, if the boys can't do it, who can? Right? Their level is so up here that it makes it creatively so much fun to work across because it allows you to come up with these ideas, to work with them on various different ideas, and then to be able to execute them at the highest level. So I think that's the stuff that really gets me going. And then also it's working and building structures behind the scenes with the team, and
mm,
myself and obviously my two co-founders. Like, it's been a dream to work with them. They're amazing. Victor, who we brought in as our head of content, is unbelievable. He's like one of the most talented people I've ever worked with, who runs the whole content operation for the Sidemen. Henry, our art director, Jazz, Anna. Like, we've got so many amazing people now across the team, and I love that structuring. Like, how are you
yeah,
bringing
yeah.
coming from a corporate business before, which had its good things and bad things being a very corporate structure, but a good corporate structure in a lot of ways, bringing some of that I guess finesse into these
Mm.
structures, and into especially this YouTube scene, which typically is very anti-corporate, I think is also quite nice. How do you get that balance? So yeah, that's a bit of a long answer, but I think those are the things that get me personally quite
Do
excited.
you enjoy being behind the scenes, or would you want to be more sort of behind the
No,
camera, like
no,
in front
no,
of the
no.
camera? Sorry.
No, no, no. No, I love it. I love it. I think the main thing for me is like the whole reason on a personal level that, for example, LinkedIn is really important for me.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Building in, I can, that's great, and it makes sense and it works. But the real reason is because it helps with all the other
Helps
things and
business.
helps the boys ultimately and the
Yeah,
brand
yeah, yeah.
mission that we're building. So the big thing for me is, yeah, I've never really been one for being out there for the sake of being out there personally. It's more, how can I be out there because it provides new opportunities, more people wanting to join us, helps to drive a connection with me, which helps other people relate to what we're doing and the mission
Mm.
we're building. And that ultimately, from a strategic perspective, is definitely worth doing. But that's kind of it's a means to an end, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I'm completely with you on that. As I was on a podcast recently where I talked about this, I was like, because at the beginning I was posting a lot on LinkedIn for sort of external validation, and then it got to the point where I was like, why am I actually doing this? And now I only sort of post on LinkedIn or apply for awards or whatever like that if it actually helps my business or like personal brand, which eventually would help my business, if you know what I
Yeah,
mean.
yeah.
So I completely get with like, but it's very unique for you because obviously like it's very easy for you to step in front of the camera now.
Yeah, it's I think also the other thing is we're so busy. Like we've got so much stuff we're doing, and I've got two babies as well at home. I've got 2.5 year old, and a 1 year old, and a wife, and all sorts. I think it's about making sure that we're doing enough that the personal brand side is relevant, because it is so important to do. And I've known that for a few years now,
Mm,
that this personal branding stuff is absolutely essential. Like building out, people buy people, right? They don't buy brands and sort of faceless entities. So the more you can get yourself out there in a way that is value adding, the better. But it's just balancing that with then the reality of, okay, we've got like these three businesses, a bunch of other things we're looking to
yeah.
launch, with family, everything else. So it's just making sure there's a balance there. But I do enjoy it. I think the big thing I love doing with it is like connecting with different people, like meet people I've never met before, being able to hopefully help some people who are younger come through, because I know there is a real lack, I think, in this space of people who are helping that next wave and that next generation come
That's why
up.
we're doing this. Yeah,
That's what we're
exactly.
doing this, right?
Yeah.
Exactly what we're doing, mate. I think it's amazing because there's a severe lack of resources. I didn't know anything about this space, and I was
Yeah.
relatively clued up on it. So yeah, I think that's the reason for it, if that makes sense.
Mm, that's a very good answer. So to wrap up the podcast, Jordan, I know so many people listening want to create content already, like producing content. Obviously, a lot smaller than the Sidemen. Like I doubt anyone listening is like bigger than them, unless like Mr. Beast is listening. Like, what sort of advice would you have for them to like to grow, to monetize, to diversify different revenue streams? Like, I guess the ultimate advice to wrap up the podcast. What do you have for them?
So I would say, what would I say? I would say bring a team. Bring a team, get a team, bring a team, get a team, bring great people around you, because the only way that you can scale, the only way is if you have people who can scale while you do the thing that you do
Yeah.
best, which is the content creation. So I think having an infrastructure, number one thing, and I think having from my experience over the years, is the big thing that people don't do. They try and do it all themselves, or they struggle with relinquishing creative control or freedom. And I think it's relinquishing that control in order to allow you the space to keep smashing it and doing what you're doing on the content side, whilst having people behind the scenes who can deliver for you. And I think also make sure that the alignment is right in terms of
Mm,
compensation, remuneration. It's so important. If you don't get the alignment, the structure, again, some of this corporate stuff, right? Making
yeah.
people really invested in your journey. Like, why would they stay? It's not just giving somebody like really low salaries and then being like, okay, well, cool, they're on this journey with me forever, or like an intern who you get for free, and that's his part. It's like, no, invest in these people, or give them real alignment from a equity or shares perspective, for example, in the long term vision of what you're trying to do.
Mm,
Because if you do that, they will work 10 times harder for you, and you'll have a much better outcome at the end of the day.
mm. Brilliant answer, Jordan. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. How can people stay in touch with you and what you're getting up to?
I mean, look, firstly, thank you, and yeah, so I think mainly LinkedIn's probably the biggest for me. So that's, yeah, Jordan Schwarzenberger. My last name is very long, so maybe just type Jordan Sidemen and it should come up, or Jordan Arcade Media. Yeah, so LinkedIn's probably the best. I mean, if anyone ever wants to reach out, email me. My email's jordan@arcade.media or whatever. I'm always happy to speak to people, and if anyone needs any advice, whatever, I'm always here.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Jordan, for coming on the podcast, and I'm sure we'll speak very soon. Thanks so much.